This is a space basically where we bring in experienced consultants to share their journey, to share the best practices that have worked for them, and we can all gain knowledge as a community. So I'm super excited that we're hosting Tracy Brinkerhoff today. Tracy has been with us from the start. She's part of Cohort Zero. She also sits on our customer advisory board. She has a long experience of doing independent consulting. We're super excited, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Tracy, and maybe tell us a bit about your background and how you got to the world of independent consulting.
Sure. Thanks, Pedro. I'm super happy to be here, chatting with you all and getting to know other members of Landa Club. My name is Tracy Brinkerhoff, as Pedro mentioned. You can probably tell I am from New Jersey, but I live in Mexico City. And I got into independent consulting. So I started my career at a boutique consulting firm in Washington, D.C. And then I went to work at a digital health SaaS startup in New York for a couple years. And in 2018, I left my last official full-time role and started this independent consulting journey. It sounds a lot more impressive than it was at the time. I was basically just looking for freelance projects to finance travel and to be a digital nomad back in 2018 when that was, I don't know, more cool than it is now maybe, but so that's how I got started, was really just looking for a way to finance like the travel and freedom part. And I wasn't taking it as seriously as I take it now. So yeah.
Thanks for that, Tracy. I usually start with the same question, but I'm going to change it up a little bit today. So, and maybe to get into the weeds right away. So, having done independent consulting for a few years, what would you say are some of the pros you have found, and also the cons, right? The good aspects, the bad aspects in this time that you've been doing it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the pros are probably obvious to a lot of people on this call. If you've tried to do this full time, at least, is the flexibility. So being able to choose who you want to work with, being able to choose how much you want to charge, and being able to kind of scale up or scale back once you get to a certain point, based on what else you want to do in life. So if you want to take on, if you're studying something on the side, or you want to pick up a new hobby or whatever, maybe instead of having 4 clients, which that's your maximum, you want to only take on 3 clients for the next 6 months, and maybe you want to charge those 3 clients more, for example, or maybe you want to explore a new skill set, and therefore you want to seek out projects that specifically are heading toward, that would either allow you to practice that skill set or help you work with people who are experts in that field or that industry or something like that. So I think the flexibility is definitely one of the biggest pros for me. And then the cons, probably the exact same. The flexibility leads to obviously some type of instability. So learning how to ride those waves. I always make the joke that I basically make the same mistake every year. I've been doing this now. This is my 6th year of technically independent consulting. And every single year I have there's a January panic where I'm like, wait, do I have enough clients planned out for this year? And then I go through I should probably find some more clients. So then I try to get some clients. Then by March, I'm like, I have way too many clients. And then by the end, then I regret it. And then in the middle of the year, normally some of the projects start to end or some things start to wrap up. And I'm like, okay, I'm good again. But it's always that wave, at least for me, of I have too little clients or I have too many clients. I'm too busy. I'm not busy enough. And the financial swings that come with that. So learning how to ride with that and work with it, I think, is probably one of the cons.
That's amazing. And obviously 6 years is a long time. So definitely proof of concept there. So in that you provide, does it change a lot? Have you productized it a bit? I'm curious about that part.
No, definitely not. I know you and I have had this conversation a little bit, Pedro, in the past around productizing and niching down. So at the start as already mentioned, kind of had no idea what I was doing and still might not, but I definitely didn't follow the advice that I would probably give to most people, which is like, look at your skill set, define something that you could try to productize or make a specific service out of, and then market that accordingly and sell that as a package or as a deliverable based contract or something like that. I just was exploratory in the beginning, which I think really, really benefited me. And I wouldn't personally have done it differently now looking back, but at the time, I was mostly taking on projects that, of course, that I knew. I actually still think I try to take on projects where like if you're like 80% confident that you can like really, really deliver it well. I think if you're 100% confident that you can deliver the project well, that's like a pure overlap with your skill set, that you risk maybe like not learning anything. And if you're just doing it because it's really good money, of course, that's fine. That's a great choice. But I think the perfect projects are where you're like 80% sure, but there's still this aspect of like, either you have to learn something new, you have to learn about a new industry, you have to learn about, I don't know, a new skill that you maybe haven't done before. And that 20% is also going to help you with like your professional development, and learning and growing. But and it'll also challenge you to like make, at least for me, to make, kind of keep you on your toes and make sure you're not just doing the same thing over and over again. So that's a long way of saying, at the beginning, I definitely didn't start out with I was just exploring. And over time, I kind of have now maybe some defined projects, very loosely defined. I like to think about it as I have like two project types that I work with right now. One is, and they have two different contract types that align with them. So one is more of deliverable based projects. And those projects are, for me, recently have been like more research based. So like research this and write a report about it type of projects. Those are obviously deliverable based because like there's going to be a report or a presentation or something concrete at the end. So I can charge a fixed price for that. There's normally way fewer meetings, a lot less working with different stakeholders at the client, a lot less back and forth, and you can kind of do them on your own time. That's what I like about them. They're not as they might be time intensive, but it's something where if you have to dedicate, set aside a weekend or two to like really focus on them, you could, and you can choose to, again, the flexibility to arrange your time that way, versus my other type of projects, which are more retainer based. And that's more of the fractional whatever, and I don't have a specific like somewhere around like operations implementation. My previous role, the last time I worked full time, I had a product manager role, and then I was like an implementation manager kind of thing. So something in that realm, but doing that basically fractionally for most of my clients, I haven't mentioned this, are early stage startups. So doing that type of role, and those retainer based roles would obviously be agreeing to an estimated amount of hours for a fixed rate per month. So let's say like I have one right now that's like 40 hours a month, and then that I'm not charging them by the hour. It's just at the end of the month, if we haven't gone over 40 hours, they're expecting to pay me an agreed upon retainer. And those tend to be more, like I said, like the fractional type of work, and you are participating in, meetings. And for me and my roles, normally I'm meeting with my clients, because a lot of them are B2B companies. So those are more time intensive, and probably longer term. But I like having, where I've kind of landed is I like having a mixture of both, because that way it allows me to, like I was saying, kind of scale up and scale down. It's obviously good to keep I want to keep one or two of those retainer based clients around so that I know that I have predictable income for the foreseeable future. And then the research based projects can kind of stop and start, or I can pick those up or drop them and scale that a little bit more easily. So that's where I've landed right now. But who knows? It might change.
That's very interesting, especially that mix and match. So where you can handle your time and sort of predict revenue a little bit. I find that super interesting. I just noticed, and I apologize that I jumped right away. So in terms of format, we have some prepared questions, and then I'll open it up to the audience if anyone has a question. But I wanted to double click on, you touched on doing consulting as a way to learn new skills and sort of test yourself. I'm wondering, what are some other ways in which you build your skills as a consultant other than the work itself? Any good advice there?
Hmm. No, I don't know if I have anything like great to share with everyone on this topic. I think I'll give an example of like a way that I try to choose projects around specific skills. Like one thing that I know that I've been weak on, or one thing that I've been uncomfortable with in the past is like the need to film yourself. If anyone's ever tried to film themselves for any, like I'm obviously on Zoom meetings and talking like this all the time, and that's fine. But when you have to like sit in front of a camera and make eye contact and just like film yourself saying something, I was like, oh, I'm so awkward at this. And not that I'm trying to be an influencer or whatever, but I was like, this is probably a skill that I should improve upon, like in the future. But I wasn't going to take steps to like take a course or like do whatever. But a project opportunity came up where they were looking for, it was basically like they were looking for people to help create content and film courses. This one happened to be like a project management course, but so they asked me to participate as like an expert where I was filming, helping them develop the content and then filming myself talking into a camera for that to help them build the course. And I probably wouldn't have said yes. Like financially, the project didn't make the most sense for me. I was like, this is like less than I would like to. I bet this is going to be more hours. Like did the rate, and I was like, I don't know if this makes the most sense. But it was a skill that I had already decided at the beginning of last year that I should try to work on. So when I saw that opportunity come up, I'm like, oh yeah, I should say yes to this. Like it's, it doesn't make sense. I try to always set don't do the best job of this, but at the beginning of the year, I try to set like, this is what my financial goal is and make it aspirational. If anyone else like, set an aspirational financial goal for yourself, but then also set some like skill type of goals. Like if a project comes up in this specific area or this industry or this whatever or this person that I really want to work with, whatever it might be, I'm going to say yes to it, even if it doesn't like necessarily get me toward my financial goal, because like you were asking, I think the heart of your question, Pedro, is like, it's hard when you're independent you're not getting pushed like courses or I don't know, book
Exactly.
clubs or whatever that are from like if you're used to working at a big company and you're used to like having a coach paid for or having, like an in-house workshop on this, you kind of have to do it yourself. So I don't have good ideas of like those specific resources or places to look for those, but I just try to do it in terms of like thinking about projects strategically.
I think that's a pretty cool answer. And I think actually that's the best way to learn, right? So if you're already committing to a project and you have to do it, then like you have all the incentive and you have to make it happen. So that's super interesting. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I think you specifically, Tracy, have a unique take on a question that comes up a lot. And we haven't been able to answer this far in previous Landa Talks. But is that you have worked with both US clients and also LATAM-based clients. So I was wondering have you found working with them, how they see independent work, how open they are to it, like any differences. I'm very curious about that experience.
Yeah, I tried to reflect on this to see if there was a main difference before this meeting, and I didn't come up with a major difference. I will say, so I've worked with, I think all of my clients share in common that they're pretty early stage. So like typically, definitely under like 100 employees. Most of them are probably under like 50. A lot are under like 10. So really like early stage startups. And I think that in general, the distinction that I've seen in more so than like LATAM versus US clients is around like just company size. I don't really work with a lot of bigger companies. So I think that the commonality across them, which is not what you asked, but is probably that early stage companies, I think, are just super early stage startups in particular are way more open. And that's why I enjoy working with them as well, to the concept of like, I don't know, kind of breaking the rules. Like, yeah, we were going to hire someone full time, but we're happy to talk to you about this, or we hadn't considered this, but let's like work with you on this project. So that I found that in general, early stage, no matter what country, is the sweet spot, at least for me, in terms of like talking about independent, being open to fractional work or working on a specific project. I was thinking the only kind of difference, I didn't come up with like main differences in working with either LATAM versus US clients. I will say that the two LATAM clients that I've worked with both came up mostly like the best way I can describe it is from like curiosity. So this was like 2021, I think. I was living here. I live in Mexico City. If I didn't already mention that, I've lived here since early 2020, right before the pandemic. And I had said, I think it was sometime in 2021, I had like published in social media and just started telling people, I want to talk to everyone working in digital health in Mexico or in Latin America. And I didn't really, that wasn't like with the intention, that wasn't like a sales strategy or anything intentional for me. I just like had time and was exploring it. I was like maybe thinking about starting a company in the space. I did Latitude at that time. Like I was just curious, like just wanted to talk to people, see what they were thinking, see what they were up to. And I think the thing that I've noticed the difference between maybe LATAM versus the US is people were so open and willing to talk to me, despite I didn't like present any credentials. I didn't present any proposal. I wasn't like, I'm going to invest in your company, or I'm going to consult for your company, or I'm going to help you. I was just like, hey, I'm just like a person. Can we talk? And I talked to so many digital health founders, and it was super informative for me. And just by being curious, that's actually how I ended up working with two different early stage companies in Latin America, because I met with the founders and I was asking them so many questions, and I was so like enthusiastic about their idea that they were eventually like, wait, are you like, and we ended up working together. But at no point was I like, this is me and these are my services, these are my packages and options. It was just like came out of a natural evolution of like showing curiosity and interest. So, and I don't think I've had that, like I've never acquired clients in the same way. In the US, it's been more like referrals. Like I'm happy to talk about getting clients because I know that's always a big topic, but I think the openness and maybe the closeness and willingness to just like talk to anyone is the main difference that I can think of.
Very interesting. And you touched on lead generations and sales strategy, and obviously I'm going to ask about that. But before that, also just very curious, since you work with early stage startups, and again, I'm going back a bit to my previous question, but have you noticed like any pushback on pricing, or how do you handle that? Like for us, for example, at Landa, it's been easier to target like more mature companies in terms of like funding. But yeah, I'm curious about your experience with early stage startups in terms of pricing, and maybe then more specifically LATAM.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one thing that over the years I've gotten more confident about. And I guess I'll speak mostly to US clients. Like as mentioned, I've only had 2 clients in Latin America, so I don't think I have like a lot of knowledge to share on pricing regarding working with a lot of early stage startups. But at least for US based clients, I have just gotten to the point where this took a while to develop, but like I know what my pricing is, and there's not much, like I don't offer much flexibility. I think one thing I learned very, very early on was like never negotiate on your rate. So if you say, this is my hourly rate, I'm never going to charge less than my hourly rate. We might cut back scope. It might be if they say, oh, okay, well, that's like, well, we wanted you, I don't know, we want to do 20 hours a week. So at that rate, that's like double our budget. Okay, why don't we start with 10 hours a week? That's fine. Like happy to cut back on scope, but like your rate stays fixed. So that's something that probably like advice that was given to me early on that I've followed through. And I think it's like a mental trick of showing people that like your work is valuable and that you're never going to, like, there's no discount available. Your work is valuable and you know that, and this is what it is. And of course clients have budgets and sometimes they're really tight, and there's flexibility to like get to the right place with them if it's a good match for both of you, but that the rates that you present in the beginning should always stay the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's great advice, actually. So thanks for that, Tracy. And coming back to the lead generation question, I've asked this question like in different formats, but maybe I'll put a constraint on it. So if you were starting all over again, knowing what you know now, and you had to choose like one or at most like two strategies to go about lead generation and keeping that pipeline full, like you said, when you're planning for the year. So what would you say has worked for you? Not necessarily that's the best for everyone, but what has worked the best for you?
Yeah, it's changed over the years. So
Interesting.
to give you an example, I know something you ask people a lot is like, how did you find your first project? Technically, my first project was from Upwork, which I would not recommend. I'm not a huge fan of platforms. I think if anyone is a fan of platforms, my biggest advice is just pull your clients off the platforms and just use it as like a discovery tool. And then as soon as possible, you can get them to a contract that they're signing directly with you. Great, because then you own the relationship. But so I started with platforms, as many people do. Probably like phase 2 of lead generation for me was network, which I know you and I have discussed before, Pedro. But my advice to people starting out is always like, tell everyone you know what you're doing. Call every person or email every person from previous jobs that you genuinely respect and you want their opinion, or you think that they respect your work, vice versa, ideally both. And you reach out to them and say, I'm doing this new thing. I would like your advice on it. People love to give advice. They love to be asked for advice. They'll be flattered. They'll want to help you. And that's a way of you just telling, like, you're basically pitching to them, but you're asking for their advice. And then you're also getting their advice and probably like taking it into consideration and maybe changing how you're talking about your services or how you're going about thinking about clients or something like that. So phase 2 for me, like I started on platforms. Phase 2 was definitely around more my own network and leveraging my own network. And that was successful for a while. And then phase 3, which I guess is still kind of around networks, but for the past, I think for the past 2 to 3 years, all of my clients have come from other clients, like 100% referrals in the way of, I think the way that I would recommend doing it. So obviously this is a very long-term game, but it's been working for me now. And like, now I feel like it's kind of I don't know, like an engine that I really genuinely don't dedicate a lot of time to sales and BD. Obviously once like an opportunity lands in my lap, I'm going to be outreaching and researching the company and like putting together a proposal, but I'm not actively looking because I use my existing good clients to find new clients. And I think it's easier probably with the retainer base. I mentioned that I kind of have like 2 groups of clients or 2 groups of projects that I think about right now. The retainer based ones, the conversation normally goes something like this. Hello, you're paying me for 40 hours a month. Do you want to pay me more? No, we have a budget constraint. Okay. Do you want to give me more hours? Like I noticed that you were talking about this project the other day, or I noticed we were about to sign this new client. Are you going to need me for 80 hours a month or 60 hours a month? No, we want to keep you at 40 hours a month. Okay, great. In order to keep me at 40 hours a month, I need more money than that. So do you know other early stage founders? Because as many of you probably know, early stage founders are in groups with other early stage founders, and there's lots of them. For example, one of my main clients did Techstars. She's also in a group in the US called VC Backed Moms. Those are like little founder communities. And what do they post about all the time? We're looking for someone part-time to do this, blah, 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 blah. And anytime she sees something that overlaps with my skill set, she will just screenshot it and send it to me and say, do you want an introduction? And then I'm getting introduced to that founder with a glowing recommendation from my current client, because my current client wants to keep me fractionally, but doesn't want to pay me more. So she has such a big incentive to say like, I need to keep you around. You're doing a good job, but I'm not in a place where I can like hire you full time or pay you more or, give you like an increase. So she's incentivized to help make those connections. And then it works out for both of us because then she can keep me full time for however much she wants. I'm getting a new client. So the past, I really think the past 2 to 3 years, I can confidently say that all of my new clients have come from one of my 2 existing clients.
That's an amazing answer. I'm glad we're recording this. If not, I would be taking notes. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense that it changes over time. That's an interesting way to frame it, and that you can then build this sort of engine based on your work. I think also the incentives part of leveraging, like in the best sense of the word, existing clients is brilliant. Wow. So okay, I won't take too much longer. I want to leave it up to the audience. So I think that the last question also, like, um, what again? If you were starting all over again, maybe not on the lead gen side, but what is one piece of advice that you would say to someone that's going to be doing consulting full time or even part time? Like any big like insights or principles you want to share?
No, I think like if I could go back and talk to myself like 5 years ago, I would probably just tell myself to raise my rates and I would tell myself to be more confident, which is both are things you just have to learn. I mean, raising your rates, I feel uncomfortable every single time and I'm not even like good at doing it. Like sometimes I'll be, I don't know, talking about like I'll be about to send a new proposal and I'm like, oh wait, when's the last time I like bumped this up? You know, it's been over a year. Okay, I'm just gonna like I feel so uncomfortable with it every time, but then every time I do it and it just like works out and then I'm super happy about it. So raise your rates. And yeah, the confidence, like I don't know. I think it's just something you have to learn as you go, at least was something that I had to learn, but just being more confident in like I think being more confident in accepting the type of projects I was talking about, where you're like, you're really sure that you can deliver 80% of it really well. And then there's a portion where you're like, ooh, I don't know. I'm going to have to figure this out. I'm going to have to like either we were talking about this earlier this week in the Landa lady chat, but like where there's the classic thing of like, I don't know, the job description and like women don't apply unless they meet 100% of the requirements and men apply if they meet like 50% or something. I don't know. That's like an anecdote. I don't even know if it's true, but that idea of like, you don't have to be confident about 100% of it to like sign yourself up to deliver it. You're going to figure out the rest. Like no one is, if you're 100% confident about it, you're probably not learning anything. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Tracy. And we obviously talked in the past, so I tried to keep it like a little different with the questions. But yep, let's open it up to the audience. Julian is already on cue, so go ahead.
Hi, guys. And Tracy, sorry, I got a bit late, but it was just what I've been hearing is pretty awesome. I have a question because I was seeing your LinkedIn and it says that you advise and consult for both American and Latin American companies, right? On early stages. Have you noticed like a constraint in Latin American founders to pay your rates, or is it the same? How do you show that value prop?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I alluded to this earlier, but just to give more. So I've worked with exactly 2 clients in Latin America. I think aspirationally when I haven't updated my LinkedIn in a really long time, but so that's one thing I would tell everyone to do that I never take my own advice on is like publishing, writing and like publishing stuff and making yourself more out there in your online presence. I'm really bad at that. But that being said, so I've worked with 2 clients in Latin America. One of them, I started out as an advisor for them and then ended up coming on board like fractionally for a little while. And with that one, it was more of like, I knew their budget and they said, in this case, it was like, it's a very early stage company and they started as a nonprofit as well. So for me, this one was partially like, I know I was talking about never negotiate on your rate, and I didn't negotiate on my rate in this circumstance, but I knew like they said, okay, we have $1,000 a month that we can pay you. What can you give us for that? So it was more like I said, okay, we're going to have like 1 meeting a week. I set the boundaries around that, knowing their budget. Like I'm going to be able to do this, this, and this for you. I'm not going to be able to participate in that. I'm not going to be able to participate in this. And that was that's what we ended up working together for like about a year in that capacity. So that in that circumstance, like I took their budget and worked with them. It wasn't, I knew because had already been kind of working with them as a advisor for free prior to that it wasn't something where I could say like, here's $10,000 a month. I'm going to charge you that. So that's how I was flexible in that circumstance. And in the only other LATAM startup that I worked with, the way they got to rates, which was very interesting, was they said, like, here's an equivalent position. I'm interested to hear what other people have done in this, honestly, in this circumstance, but I don't think they had worked with a lot of consultants. Like, they were open to working with me, but they were kind of like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to find an equivalent role at our company and just take what this person's monthly rate would be and like pay you as if you were that person full time, but only for like 3 months, because the project was projected to be like a 3-month duration. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But in that circumstance, they were dictating it again. Like, I was working within their constraints a little bit more than me pushing it onto them. And that was strategic for me because I was at a point, both of these were like 1 to 2 years ago, where I wanted to learn more I wanted to have clients in Latin America to expand my horizon and learn more. So.
Cool, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Tracy. Do you have any other takers? Any other questions?
Don't be shy.
I'll just jump in. Tracy, hey, I'm Abigail. Feel like we have tons to talk about. We got to get coffee sometime.
Sure.
But anyway, I've been doing fractional operations stuff for about 2 years now as well, in CDMX, or not with clients here, but living here. Question for you is actually kind of specific, but I think it's interesting how it's changed over time too. You said you've got 2 kind of flavors. You've got more project-based, deliverable-based research, and then real fractional retainer, less focused on scope. How does that break down percentage-wise, and how have you found that it's changed over time for you?
I think it's changed. Like, that has shifted every year. And as I mentioned, I didn't arrive to these, like, if you had asked me maybe even like 2 years ago, I definitely wouldn't have given the exact same answer. Because I don't think I had as many of the project-based type of clients to call it like an actual, to think about it in my mind as an actual like separate group. But yeah, the breakdown, like I mentioned, I normally try to keep I have one client, the one that I mentioned has referred me to a lot of other clients that has been constant, and that's been nice. It's fractional, but it's pretty stable. It's been pretty stable. At least I hope it'll be stable in the future. So that's kind of like an anchor. And then I normally look to take at least like one other I want to keep at least one other fractional type of engagement on the docket as well. And then the research-based ones, it's trickier to balance those or like the deliverable-based ones, which for me recently have been like research type things. Like right now, for example, I think I have like 3 proposals for those type of projects out, and maybe none of them will end up getting signed, and that's fine because I have the fractional-based clients. So I'm like, it's okay if those will get signed, but if they all get signed, I'm going to be like, okay. Then it's going to be too much. So the constant like push and pull between is this like pushing, the thing that I struggle with is like getting pushed over your bandwidth really easily, but also like trying to constantly like be at it or close to it. So I don't know if that answered your question. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
I have another question, and this question might be for both of you, Tracy and Abigail. So I've been trying to put myself out for this consultant gig. I've been working on it for about 6 months. I've got a little, some of them, but what would be your advice on how to take or how to prospect those new customers, new companies that you guys want to attract, and what's usually your go-to strategy?
So you're talking like finding them, or you've already identified like these people you want to
you
work
said like you mentioned that many of your customers, they already come on word of mouth.
Mhm.
But I don't know if you at the beginning like went for yourself and look for some customers. What was your technique or your go-to strategy to get those? And to Abigail, I think that's the same question.
Yeah, I'll answer first, and I'm happy to let Abigail respond as well. So what I was saying, and maybe I didn't fully explain it, but what I recommend that people always do is like not so much targeting specific customers. I don't know. I at least have found less success in saying like, I want to work with this company, like this specific company. Let me like outreach to them and like try to get on their radar and send them my website or pitch to them or whatever, versus talking to your own network first. So that's what I was saying that I recommend people do when they're starting is like put together something. It could be a website, it could be whatever, some slides or whatever you want to show that's like, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to do fractional work in operations. It doesn't have to be fully defined. It doesn't have to have pricing and packages and whatever details. It just has to be like some concept. You wrote some words, a paragraph, whatever. And then talk to everyone you know about it. Talk to everyone you respect, ask for their advice on it, ask for their feedback on it and what you're doing. Those people that you've worked with before probably either work at companies you used to work at, or they've moved on and they work at a new company. That new company or your old company or whoever, wherever these people are, whatever they're doing, the new company that they founded probably might be a good client for you. Unless you're doing something so specific that you're like, none of the people in my network. Normally, the reason that this strategy is successful for people is because you're doing stuff that's related to your previous job or jobs, in which case the people you used to work with at those jobs and that you know from those companies either still work there or they work for a similar company or whatever. So the reason that I recommend doing this, like, I don't know, like planting seeds activity is because it's not like, I mean, ideally, a few of them say, oh my God, what you're describing is exactly what we need at my company. Let me introduce you to the CEO. And then they can, here you go, you know, they tee up a client perfectly for you. But what normally happens is they say like, cool, good luck. And then you don't hear from them. And then like 6 months later, that person's going to call you up and say, hey, I was just in a meeting and somebody mentioned that we really need someone fractional to like fill this role. That's that, like something that overlapped with what you talked to them about. It's going to trigger something in their brains and they're going to say like, wait a second, Julian was telling me that he did something about this. How do, like, what? And then they're going to reach out to you. Or they're going to be at a new company and that's going to come up. I don't know. I think like that's my recommendation for long-term strategy. I know the frustrating part, and that's why I say like I don't love platforms as a long-term strategy. I think platforms is helpful for people to get the first few clients because it's clients that are already have acknowledged that they have like a gap that they're looking to fill. They've already set aside budget for it. They've already defined some of it. Like those clients are already looking for you on by the time they're posting something to one of these like Upwork, Catalant, whatever, TopTal, these platforms, versus you trying to like convince them that they have a need, if that makes sense. Abigail, what do you think?
I think it would probably add just like all of the fuel to that fire that I could. It's for me, it's the planning. It's like the scatter shot approach to planting seeds. Like talk with everyone you know about what you're doing in the most exciting way possible, so that like they're like, oh my God, like every VC-backed company probably needs this. Like at almost every given point in time, and you're like, great. When you think of one, hey, send them my way. Would love to have a conversation. So that approach, but I also think I haven't had any luck on the platforms at all, frankly. I think it's really difficult when you don't, I'm a little bit more fractional COO, and so productizing what I do is like the slipperiest thing ever. But what I did find really early on helped me is that when I started talking to people and I was like refining my pitch, it was seeing what resonated and literally like writing down the phrases that people really latched onto. And like right now, like tons of people have been like, I really like that you say you free up founder bandwidth. And I'm like, duh, that's what like everybody does if they're being a good fractional like chief of staff or whatever. But like somehow that really resonates. And there were probably like 3 or 4 key phrases that people really latched onto and said, and like you could see the spark in the eyes, or like they wanted to talk more about. And I would just start like trying to key into those things and then make it part of how you position yourself so that you can get to, oh, I get what you do faster. In those conversations or in the pitch or whatever it is. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you both. Very good. Really enriching. Thank you.
Thank you. We got a 2-for-1, so that was great. Any other takers? Any other questions?
I have one, and thanks a lot, Tracy. It was a great chat. I guess one that I had, which is very tactical and can be kind of weird sometimes, but how do you go about asking for client testimonials? I don't know if you've done this in the past. I know a lot of clients have been through referrals, and maybe those didn't need any testimonial. But especially in the beginning, how did you go about that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I am not as good about doing this as I should be, because now I'm lazy as but what I did in the beginning, I'm trying to think. I think it was as part of like a project wrap up and closure. So I think there's a lot of value in project closure, and I think a lot of the times it's like very overlooked. And what I would recommend doing is like make it a very formal closure process. And it doesn't even have to be the end of a project either. So what I failed to mention this, but I really like to keep contracts short. That comes from getting burned kind of multiple times by there's a trade-off, because of course you want longer contracts, because then it's going to be, like I mentioned, more stable for you, especially if you're doing something fractional, like, oh great, 6 months, a year, that sounds great. But then things can change really quickly, especially like in my role a lot of the time as kind of like B2B implementation type of work. If I'm working with my clients and the sales team, which I'm not responsible for, stops bringing in new clients for my client, there's less for me to do. So there's just situations where like there's a lot of reasons outside of your control. Things can change really quickly, especially at really early stage companies. So for that reason, I like to keep it contract short. My preference is normally, like, even with ongoing clients, I normally sign quarterly, and that provides, like, I'll sign for 3 months, like Q1, and then sometimes the conversation is just like, you want to renew that for Q2? Great, let's do it. But it gives you a chance to be like, let's have a meeting where we discuss and review, like, what did I do in Q1? Like, here's all the work that I did in Q1. What is your feedback for me? What are the priorities? And one of the easiest tricks I've heard is, like, in that type of meeting, first you want to send in advance, obviously, like, glowing, I changed the world for you in Q1. I did everything. Here's all my highlights, whatever. And most of the time your client will come to the meeting and be like, yeah, that's true. And then you ask them, you're recording the meeting, and you ask them in the meeting, like, can you talk about, like, what do you think I did well in Q1? Or what did you think I did poorly over the course of this last, whatever, how long it is. And then you take the part where they're saying nice things about you, not necessarily the constructive feedback part. And you just film it, and then you turn it into a testimonial, and then you send it to them and say, obviously get their approval, but you say, like, hey, I took some clips from our last meeting, like, don't be sketchy about it. But like, you say upfront, I'm recording this, I might use it. And then you piece together their clips, send it to them and say, like, do you approve I made this testimonial, it's for my marketing. Do you approve me using this, you talking about me? The way that works is because then the worst thing in the world, which I've asked clients to do in the past, and it's horrible because no one wants to do this, again, sitting in front of a camera, being awkward, is like, you ask them to, even if you send them the text, they have to, like, look nice and, like, put the camera on and be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And that's just, like, another thing on their to-do list. So I think the best is genuine feedback in the moment, in the meeting, record it, and then flip it. And use the short contracts as, like, a stopping point you should also be doing that anyway. Like, again, sometimes I get lazy with it, but, like, when signing a new contract, my best practice that I would say is to try to always do some type of, like, reflection planning, either whether that's, like, actually setting OKRs, or just, like, what are my priorities, or like, where else can I support you in this, whatever, depending on the client and the project. So yep, using that as a stopping point and a look forward.
Amazing. Thank you. I got one more, if I can go, Pedro. Actually, does anybody else have a question?
I have a small one.
Go
Tracy,
ahead.
how do you organize yourself? I mean, working as a consultant is quite demanding, right? You have to do some marketing, some prospecting for new customers. You have to close deals. You have to attend meetings. You have to actually work on the project. You have to do billing, taxes. answering complaints, providers, keeping track of so many different things. How do you do it?
I don't know what the easiest way is to answer this. I'm like incredibly type A, and I genuinely love organizing things. So I think I find it thrilling to have competing, priorities all the time. The easy answer is I have a Notion dashboard. Like the technical answer is I have a Notion dashboard, which I arrange. The dashboard is basically what is my to-do list, and then I have like different folders. I'm like looking at it here on the side for each active client. Once I stop working with a client, I'll just like archive the folder so it's always there, but like I'm not actively looking at it. All my notes for that client from meetings, whatever, are in each of those client folders, and then as I have next steps that I need to be responsible for, I pull them into the to-do list on the dashboard. I also use Arc browser, which is like it's basically Chrome, but you can like organize it better. I don't know if anyone else is using Arc, but I really like it because you can have different workspaces. And so typically, like last fall when I had I think I had 4 clients at the same time, like 4 different projects going on at the same time. I have like my personal workspace, which, is just like whatever I'm looking at on like my own projects, like decorating my house or whatever. Then I have one workspace for each. They're like each a little emoji, and one workspace for each client. So that way I can have like my time tracker is always at the top. If I have a specific email and like calendar for that client, because sometimes they'll give you an email address, and I'll have that there at the top of that workspace. I'll have any open tabs for that client in that specific workspace. And that's really helped me because then I'm never like, it helps reduce distraction for me if I'm working on one client. I click into that workspace and like my internet browser is just focused on, still has a bunch of tabs, but it's whatever tabs were relevant to that client at least, versus like, oh, what about this thing over here? So yeah, that's the more technical answer on how I try to organize myself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Gabriel. You had a couple of questions too.
I just had a personal one because I know there's a lot of readers in Lambda. I know Pedro is going to like this one, but Trace, is there a particular book that has been particularly useful to you for your consulting practice or otherwise that you'd, I guess, recommend to the public, and why, if you can share?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of what the most one. I don't know what, like, I'm trying to think of one I would actually say that I like. I don't think there's any one singular book that I could say that I like use on a day-to-day basis, at least consciously. But we read, what did we read? Thinking in Systems, right?
Yep.
In our mini book club that ended up just being me and Pedro. We read Thinking in Systems, and it was really good, and I would recommend it. Like, it was very insightful, and I hopefully maybe use it subconsciously. I don't know if I consciously refer to it. For the classic one of like product management type of stuff, which I have like sitting somewhere on a bookshelf, is Inspired. So I guess I think about that regularly as like something when I'm stuck with something that's more of like a product related problem or dilemma, or if a client's stuck with that, like thinking about what would Marty Kagan say in that scenario. And yeah, I don't know, no specific like consulting books. Oh, the one recommendation that I regularly make and have made to many people in Landa Club before is Tom Critchlow's blog, The Strategic Independent. I love his writing. He's been an independent consultant for I think like 9 or 10 years. He's someone I like followed on Twitter for a while, but he writes deeply and well about being like what being an independent consultant means, and then also more like theoretical, and then also he has some practical stuff too about like how he thinks about his work or how he charges. I think he mostly does like SEO stuff, but I don't even know what his actual services are because I just like reading his blog. So I would recommend that. as something more specifically related to independent consulting.
Amazing.
Would you mind
Thank you.
writing it down here?
Yeah, I can
Something
share
like-
it. Let me share. I was actually looking at this earlier. I'll share in the chat because I was trying to find his specific article. This is my favorite one of his, which I've sent to people before. There you go. It should be in the chat.
I remember that one, and we can share after.
It's around like not defining a niche, which I think it's an interesting read. I would totally recommend everyone read it. It's long, but because he makes an argument for not niching down. Like part of the argument, I had it up because I was trying to remember what his argument was for this. Part of it is more around the idea that like executive level roles, if you're positioning yourself as like an executive level roles, are inherently ambiguous. I think like Abigail, you kind of referred to that with the fractional COO thing. And that more like closer to entry level roles are more easy to define and to be able to say like, I do X, like I make pitch decks, or I analyze this data, or I build a financial model, whatever, like that, those more concrete type roles. Yes, they're easier to define, but if you want to be positioning yourself as more of like an executive level, they're inherently going to be more ambiguous. And he talks about like what that means and what to do about it and what to do. Like, okay, but how do you market yourself if you don't have a specific niche that you can speak to? And he has some good ideas for that, like I mentioned, around writing and like putting your own perspective out into the world by like writing or making videos or whatever, things that I don't do, but you know, aspirational.
Cool. Thanks for that, Tracy. We still have a few minutes if anyone else wants to like ask a last minute question. And if not, we can start wrapping up.
Tracy, just describe your next dream client. What does that look like?
I think my favorite, so I worked in digital health for a while, and I used to like only work with digital health clients mostly because again, that was what my network was and that's what I knew about. I've definitely expanded beyond that in the last couple of years, but I still have a sweet spot for it, specifically in women's health. So I think anytime, like what I'm most excited about is always like organizations. I would say like a dream client would probably be women's health organizations that are like doing something impactful and moving quickly. I think that that's a nuance that it's hard to, of course, every startup thinks they're moving quickly, right? Like everyone thinks they're moving quickly, but sometimes the reality is some are moving less quickly. And it's hard to know, even like, it's something I kind of try to suss out and evaluate from like the outside before you start working with a client. But I think, at least in my experience, if anyone has ideas on how to like probe for that, I'd be interested to hear them. But in my experience, it's something that you normally don't find out until you like actually get into the weeds and start working with them. And then sometimes you're like, oh, okay, we're just kind of like chugging along here, but we're not as maybe like innovative or ambitious or whatever as I hoped. So yeah, that's what I would say. Like a women's health startup that's like doing something cool and moving really quickly.
Cool. So thank you again, Tracy, and thanks everyone for joining. We took almost the entire hour, so that makes me happy. So yeah, we'll see you next time, and thanks again, everyone. It was a good session.